Shalom, Yasharallah. Greetings to the 12 tribes scattered abroad. I'm Yahweh Sop Ban Yasharallah. I've been seeing a lot of videos online about the 400-year captivity and saying that it's going to end the year 2019. That is not what Scripture supports. And the thing about that is, I'm concerned that the year 2019 comes and goes. We're still here in our captivity. And as a result, that being used by our enemy to pull a lot of my brothers and sisters out of the faith. We are Israel, regardless if we're set free 2019 or beyond that. We are Israel. Yah is the Most High Power. Nothing can change those two facts. But I saw the need to put together a teaching to hopefully give some understanding on Scripture and on prophecy as it relates to the 400-year captivity. Okay. Now we're going to jump right on into this. We're going to start at Genesis, the 15th chapter, and the 13th and 14th verses. These are the verses that most of you are familiar with. And it reads, "And Yah said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Verse 14, "And also that nation whom they shall serve, I will judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance." This is where most people stop reading. But we're going to go back to chapter 13, verse 12. And it reads, "Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom." Now take notice that Abram is dwelling in the land of Canaan. Genesis 13, verse 14 and 15. "And Yahweh said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward." Verse 15. "For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever." Okay, so now we have Abram being in Canaan and being told by the Most High Yah to look in every direction, and all the land that he saw, the Most High told Abram that he would give it to him and his seed forever. Genesis 13 and 17. It says, "Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee." So again, Yah is telling Abram to walk through the land, and all of this land that you walk through, I'm going to give it to you. Verse 18, "Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto Yahweh." Okay, so we have now Abraham being in Hebron, as the scripture says. The red circle is circled around Hebron, which is the area that's being spoken about that Abraham is now in. Now we're going to Genesis 14, starting with verse 12. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Verse 13. And there came one that had escaped, and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner. And these were confederate with Abram. All right, verse 13 just told us that Abram was dwelling in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite. Again, this is a map identifying Hebron, showing you the area where Abram was. Now, I show this map because it's going to give us details or explain places as we read further on in the lesson. This map shows more locations, which is going to come in very helpful, as you will see later. Genesis chapter 15 and verse 7. And he said unto him, I am Yahweh that brought thee out of Ur of the Chaldees, to give thee this land to inherit. Genesis 15, 13. And Yah said unto Abram, Know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. Verse 14. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. Now we have to notice what 13 tells us. Verse 13 says that Abram's seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and they shall serve them, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. Okay? This is where most people stop reading, as if this is the complete prophecy. But we must read on to get the complete spoken prophecy. I'm not going into the whole 400-year prophecy thing itself, because there are other videos on YouTube that goes into that, and quite frankly, I feel do a better job than I could do. So I will put the information of one such video down below. But we're going to read on to verse 16. And Genesis 15 and 16 says, and this is the important part that gives us a timeline. But in the 4th generation shall they come hither again, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. Now we're going to skip to verse 18. In the same day, Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Now we have to keep in mind verse 16 tells us that in the 4th generation, the seed of Abram shall come to the land where he is currently again. And it also tells us that the iniquity or the sins of the Amorites is not yet full. Keep those two facts in mind. Verse 19, the Most High is continuing to tell Abram what lands he's going to give to his seed. He says, the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites. Verse 20, and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaims. Verse 21, and the Amorites and the Canaanites and the Girgashites and the Jebusites. This is a map showing those nations or those lands that the Most High told Abram that he was going to give to his seed. Now, remember, Abram is in Hebron, which is circled with the red circle. And all of these arrows, these red arrows pointing to these different land masses, are the areas that the Most High is telling Abram that he's going to give to his descendants. These are the lands that the Most High is going to give to the seed of Abram. Now here, side by side, you can see the land after it was given to the 12 tribes of Israel. Look at the different masses, the land masses. You can see they are exactly what the Most High told Abram that he was going to give to his descendants. I will show from Scripture, precept upon precept, Abram's seed taking and dwelling in the land of the Amorites in their fourth generation, just as verses 16 through 21 states. We're going to now go to Exodus, the book of Exodus, first chapter. And it reads, Now these are the names of the children of Israel, which came into Egypt. Every man and his household came with Jacob. Verse 2, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. Verse 3, Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin. Verse 4, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. Verse 5, And all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls, for Joseph was in Egypt already. Verse 6, And Joseph died, and all his brethren, and all that generation. This is a very important verse. Let me read it again. And Joseph died, and all his brethren. So that's Joseph and the other 11 brothers. They all died. And it says, and all that generation. So we have Abram, who received the prophecy. Abram gave birth or begat Isaac, which is the first generation. Isaac begat Jacob, which is the second generation. Jacob begat the 12 sons or the 12 tribes of Israel, which is the third generation. We have to remember the word told us that Joseph and all his brothers and that whole generation died, which was the third generation, thus bringing us to the fourth generation. Exodus 1 verse 7. And the children of Israel, which is the fourth generation, were fruitful and increased abundantly and multiplied and waxed exceedingly mightily. And the land was filled with them. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply, and it come to pass that, when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies, and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Verse 11. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters, to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. Verse 13. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel, the fourth generation, to serve with rigor. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. Sounds familiar, huh? All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigor. Okay, we're now going to read the account of this happening in the book of Psalms, 105th chapter. We're going to start with verse 23. Israel also came into Egypt, and Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham. And he increased his people greatly, and made them stronger than their enemies. He turned their heart to hate his people, to deal subtly with his servants. Verse 26. He sent Moses his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen. They showed his signs among them, and wonders in the land of Ham. Jump down to verse 36. He smote also all of the firstborn in their land, the chief of all their strength. He brought them forth also with silver and gold. And there was not one feeble person among their tribes. Egypt was glad when they departed, for the fear of them fell upon them. So in the book of Psalms, the 105th chapter, we see Israel going into Egypt, being oppressed by the Egyptians, the Most High judging the Egyptians, and then the Israelites coming forth out of Egypt with gold and silver, just as the Most High said to Abram. Jumping down to Psalms 105, verse 42. For he, meaning Yah, remembered his holy promise, and Abraham his servant. And he brought forth his people with joy, and his chosen with gladness. And he gave them the lands of the heathen, and they inherited the labor of the people, that they might observe his statutes and keep his laws. Praise Yahweh. We're going to get another account of this happening yet again. This time it's going to come from the so-called New Testament, from the book of Acts. I'm going to start reading the 6th chapter, 8th verse. And Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and miracles among the people. Now we're going to jump over to chapter 7, starting with verse 2. And he said, Men, brethren, and fathers, hearken. The God of glory appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia, before he dwelt in Haran, and said unto him, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and come into the land which I shall show thee. Verse 4. Then came he out of the land of the Chaldeans, and dwelt in Haran. And from thence, when his father was dead, he removed him into his land, wherein ye now dwell. And he gave him none inheritance in it, no, not so much as to set his foot on. Yet he promised that he would give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child. Verse 7. And the nation to whom they shall be in bondage will I judge, said Yah. And after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision. And so Abraham begat Isaac, and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat the 12 patriarchs. So remember, Abram received the covenant, or the prophecy. Isaac is the first generation. Then Isaac begat Jacob, which is the second generation. Jacob begat the 12 tribes of Israel, which is the third generation. Acts 7 and 9. And the patriarchs, moved with envy, sold Joseph into Egypt. But Yah was with him, and delivered him out of all his afflictions, and gave him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he made him governor over Egypt and all his house. Acts 7 and 14. Then sent Joseph and called his father Jacob to him, and all his kindred, 60 souls. So Jacob went down into Egypt and died, he and our fathers, and were carried over into Shechem, and laid in the sepulchre that Abraham bought for a sum of money from the sons of Emor, the father of Shechem. Verse 17. But when the time of the promise drew nigh, which Yah had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. That verse 17 is proof that the 400-year prophecy is speaking about Egypt. Because look at what it said. Verse 17 again. But when the time of the promise drew nigh, or drew near. What promise is that being spoken of? It's the promise that Stephen was talking about. The promise that Yah made to Abram, saying that he was going to give that land to his descendants, saying that they would be afflicted, saying that they would come out with great wealth. That is the promise that's being talked about here. So it says that when the time of that promise drew nigh, which Yah had sworn to Abraham, the people grew and multiplied in Egypt. Verse 18. Till another king arose, which knew not Joseph. The same dealt subtly with our kindred, and evil entreated our fathers. so that they cast out their young children to the end they might not live. All of this that took place, according to verse 17, when the time of the promise drew close or drew nigh. Verse 20, in which time Moses was born. So it's saying that Moses was born in the time period that the promise drew nigh. In that time period is when Moses was born, when the promise was about to unfold. Verse 20 goes on to say, and was exceeding fair, and nourished up in his father's house 3 months. And when he was cast out, Pharaoh's daughter took him up and nourished him for her own son. Jump down to verse 35. This Moses, whom they refused, saying, who made thee a ruler and a judge? The same did Yah send to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the angel which appeared to him in the bush. He brought them out after that he had shown wonders and signs in the land of Egypt, and in the Red Sea, and in the wilderness, 40 years. So, reading the 7th chapter of Acts, there is no doubt whatsoever, according to verse 17, that the promise that Abram was given by the Most High was fulfilled by our forefathers in the land of Egypt. Okay, we've seen the prophecy and the promise given to Abram in Genesis, the 15th chapter. We've seen the prophecy come to pass in the book of Exodus, seen it spoke about by David in the Psalms, and then retold by Stephen in the book of Acts. And now we are going to start to see Israel taking over the land of the Amorites, according to the prophecy that was given to Abraham by the Most High Yah. Numbers chapter 21, starting at verse 10. And the children of Israel set forward and pitched in Oboth. And they journeyed from Oboth and pitched at Ajeabrim in the wilderness which is before Moab, toward the sunrising. From thence they removed and pitched in the valley of Zered. From thence they removed and pitched on the other side of Arnon, which is in the wilderness that cometh out of the coast of the Amorites. For Arnon is the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Here's a map that I've got showing you the exact same thing that was just spoken in Scripture. You have Arnon, which is right there in the middle of Moab and the Amorites. As it says, Arnon is on the border of Moab, where you see it sitting on the border, and it is between Moab and the Amorites. Verse 21. And Israel sent messengers unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, saying, Let me pass through thy land. We will not turn into the fields, or into the vineyards. We will not drink of the waters of the well, but we will go along by the king's highway until we passed thy borders. And Sihon would not suffer Israel to pass through his border. But Sihon gathered all his people together and went out against Israel into the wilderness. And he came to Jahaz and fought against Israel. Verse 24. And Israel smote him with the edge of the sword, and possessed his land from Arnon unto Jabbok, even unto the children of Ammon. For the border of the children of Ammon was strong. And Israel took all these cities, and Israel dwelt in all the cities of the Amorites, in Heshbon, and in all the villages thereof, just as spoken in the prophecy of Yah to Abraham, that his seed would dwell in all of those lands. We have another map showing the land that was possessed by Israel from Arnon. You have Arnon here, the bottom red arrow that's pointing upward, to Jabbok. Jabbok is above the other arrow that's pointing downward. It's pointing right at Jabbok. So it's letting you know that that's the area that was spoken of in that verse. And it said, verse 25, and Israel took all these cities, and Israel dwelt in all the cities of the Amorites, in Heshbon. You see Heshbon, that's in the red rectangle there. And it said that they took it even unto the border of the children of Ammon, which is highlighted there in green. So they took that whole area from the Amorites. And remember the prophecy that was given to Abram, it said that his descendants would come back in the fourth generation to take that land, because the Amorites had not yet committed all of their iniquity that they were going to commit. So obviously by this time they had committed whatever iniquities the Most High had for them to commit, because now we have their land being taken over by Israel. And here's a close-up shot showing that area. Numbers 21:31. Thus Israel dwelt in the land of the Amorites. And Moses sent to spy out Jazer, and they took the villages thereof, and drove out the Amorites that were there. And they turned and went up by the way of Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, went out against them, he and all his people, to the battle of Edrei. Verse 34. And Yahweh said unto Moses, Fear him not, for I have delivered him into thy hand, and all his people, and his land. And thou shalt do to him as thou didst unto Sihon, king of the Amorites, which dwelt at Heshbon. So they smote him and his sons and all his people, until there was none left him alive, and they possessed his land. So we can clearly see, according to scripture and the maps that was presented, we clearly see the seed or the descendants of Abraham after they left Egypt, coming into the land of their enemy, those different nations, and taking those lands over and dwelling in those lands. So there should be no doubt whatsoever as far as when the prophecy for the 400 years took place. Once again, I am Yahawasap Ban Yasharala. Thank you for allowing me to serve you. Shalom.